Vicky sat alone in her dorm room in Hanoi, trying to finish her homework under the weak glow of a table lamp. The rest of the room was dark. Her roommate had gone out for the night, and the dorm hallway outside was silent. Only the scratching of her pen could be heard. Then, a deep breathing sound came from the restroom. Vicky stopped writing. She slowly looked toward the half-open bathroom door. Silence. She nervously laughed to herself. Probably the pipes. She went back to her homework. Then again. Ha, ha. Louder this time, like someone standing inside the restroom, breathing heavily in the dark. Vicky's hands trembled. "Hello," she whispered. No answer. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. The light shook as she slowly walked toward the restroom. The bathroom door creaked open wider by itself. Inside was complete darkness. Then, drip, drip, water fell from somewhere inside. Vicky pointed the flashlight down. Wet footprints covered the bathroom floor, but they didn't lead into the restroom. They led out of it, toward her desk. Her breathing stopped. Slowly, she turned around. Someone was sitting in her chair. Long black hair covered its face. Its shoulders moved slowly up and down. Then her table lamp suddenly turned off. In the darkness, a voice whispered beside her ear, "You heard me breathing, so now I can hear yours."
Nomeo lived with her boyfriend, John, in a small wooden house on top of a forest-covered mountain on Phu Quoc Island. One night, Nomeo was alone. John had gone to an important business meeting in town, leaving her by herself in the quiet house. As she lay in bed, scrolling through funny videos on her phone, she laughed softly to herself. Eventually, she turned off the lights and prepared to sleep. Just as she closed her eyes, she heard something outside. At first, it was faint. Then, it became clearer. Someone was crying. A long, sorrowful cry echoed from behind the house. Nomeo sat up. The crying continued. Confused and curious, she slowly walked to the back door and opened it. Outside was complete darkness. The forest stood silent beneath the night sky. She turned on her phone's flashlight and pointed it around the backyard. Nothing. No one was there. After a few moments, she sighed and turned around to go back inside. That's when she felt it. A cold sensation behind her, as if someone was standing inches away. Nomeo's heart began to race. The crying had stopped. Everything was silent. Too silent. She slowly walked toward the house. Then, a hand touched her shoulder. Nomeo froze. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But her body refused to move. Only a single tear rolled down her cheek. Suddenly, she saw headlights shinning through the trees. John's car. Relief flooded through her. She tried to call his name, but no sound came out. Then a voice whispered beside her ear, "Shoo, shoo, shoo, shoo." The voice was so close she could feel its breath. At that moment, her body finally moved. Nomeo ran. She sprinted toward John's car, threw herself into his arms, and burst into tears. Later that night, after she calmed down, she told John everything. Concerned, John grabbed a flashlight, and together they walked into the backyard to investigate. As the light swept across the ground, both of them froze. Hidden beneath the overgrown grass were several old tombstones. None of them had names, just weathered stones buried in the darkness. Era was entirely tuned out from the world, laughing with her friends over Discord in the neon glow of her monitor. It was past midnight, and the rest of the house was dead silent, until a strange sound cut through her headset. Wet scratch. It was coming from the first floor, right by the stairs outside her room. Era slipped her headphones off. The air in her room suddenly felt freezing. Wet scratch. It was moving up the steps, heart hammering. She grabbed her phone, switched on the flashlight, and slowly nudged her bedroom door open. The hallway was pitch black. She panned the beam of light toward the staircase and froze. Climbing the stairs was a woman with long, matted black hair. But she wasn't walking. She had no legs. The entity was crawling up the steps, dragging her torso with her fingernails, clawing at the wood. As the light hit her, the woman's head snapped upward with a sickening crack. Through the curtain of dark hair, a pair of bloodshot, hollow eyes locked onto Era, and she began to crawl up the stairs twice as fast. Do you know about the headless priest, Pugat na Pader? Stories of headless priests are incredibly common across old Spanish-era churches, historic universities like the University of Santo Tomas and Ateneo de Manila, and old graveyards. Night shift workers, security guards, or students staying late often report hearing the heavy clinking of chains being dragged across concrete corridors. When they turn around, they encounter a spectral priest floating or walking, completely missing his head. Sometimes he is seen carrying his own severed head in his hands. The backstory. This legend stems from real historical trauma. During the Philippine Revolution against Spain, and later during the brutal Japanese occupation in World War II, many Filipino and foreign priests were executed by decapitation. I took a midnight shortcut down a dark road lined with massive balete trees. A woman in a white dress flagged me down, and against my better judgment, I let her hop onto the back of my delivery scooter. Instantly, the air turned freezing. The bike dragged heavily, the engine straining as if carrying pure iron. In my side mirror, I watched her long hair part, revealing a smooth, faceless head with a wide, jagged slit stretching into a grin. I slammed on the brakes, crashed, and scrambled backward. The road was empty. She was gone. Terrified, I sped to a well-lit convenience store to catch my breath. As I sat there, my phone buzzed with a message from the customer waiting for their food. "Kuya, are you almost here? I just saw you pass my street on the app map. But why is there a woman sitting behind you, holding onto your waist?" I slowly looked over at my parked scooter. The seat was empty, but the rear suspension WL as pressed completely flat against the tire.
Do you know, in May 1953, 17-year-old Clarita Villanueva was jailed for vagrancy at Manila's ancient old Bilibid prison. Days into her stay, she began screaming in agony as bloody, human-like bite marks actively sank into her neck and shoulders. Clarita claimed she was being attacked by two invisible demonic entities. To investigate, Manila Mayor Arsenio Lacson and Medical Chief Dr. Mariano Lara visited her cell. Right before their eyes, Clarita's flesh bunched up, and she began bleeding from fresh, deep teeth indentations that were physically impossible for her to inflict on herself. When a skeptical doctor in the room accused her of faking it, Clarita stared at him and whispered, "You will die." The very next day, that doctor unexpectedly collapsed and passed away. The terrifying attacks only ceased after a series of high-profile exorcisms were performed inside the Joy was studying late into the night in her room at an old university dormitory in Manila. Her roommate, Anna, was already asleep, with her bed curtains drawn and the blanket pulled completely over her head. As Joy was reading her book, she heard a strange, heavy breathing sound coming from the bed. "Anna, are you okay?" Joy asked, but there was no answer, only the blanket trembling slightly. Feeling exhausted, Joy decided to go to the restroom to wash her face with cold water. As she stepped out into the hallway, someone walked out of the restroom. It was unmistakably Anna. She smiled at Joy and said, "You're still not asleep? I just finished washing my face." Joy's blood ran cold, and her heart began to race. If the real Anna was standing right here, then what was that thing lying under the blanket in their room? She walked slowly back to her room and pushed the door wide open. The room was empty, but when she pulled back the blanket on Anna's bed, there was no one there. The bed was filled entirely with freezing cold dirt that smelled exactly like the damp soil of a graveyard. On November 24th, 1993, a rainy Wednesday night, a college freshman boarded the last 11 p.m. Ikot jeepney at the University of the Philippines Diliman campus. She was the only passenger. A few blocks later, a girl wearing a white dress hailed the jeepney and sat directly across from her. She kept her head bowed, her long black hair completely shielding her face. As the jeepney drove down the dim, unlit stretch of Magsaysay Avenue, the student looked at the glass window behind the stranger. In the reflection, she saw a pale, heavily bruised and bloodied face staring right back at her. Terrified, the student looked up, but the physical girl across from her was still just sitting there silently with her head down. The student panicked and hopped off at the very next corner. As she scrambled away, the driver slammed on his brakes, leaned out and yelled, "Mabuti bumaba ka agad. Tiningnan ko sa rearview mirror ko. Walang paa yung sumakay na babae. Good thing you got off fast. I looked in my rearview mirror. That girl who got on had no feet." In 1981, First Lady Imelda Marcos ordered a massive theater built in just 3 months for an international film festival. To meet the deadline, 4,000 laborers worked around the clock. Then, disaster struck. At 3 a.m. on November 17th, the scaffolding collapsed. Dozens of workers plunged into the orchestra pit, trapped in quick-drying wet cement. Instead of pausing to rescue them, officials allegedly ordered more concrete poured over the dead and dying to keep construction on schedule. Today, witnesses still report hearing weeping and desperate scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. In 1897, in rural West Virginia, a young woman named Elva Zona Heaster Shue was found dead in her home. Doctors initially ruled her death as natural, but Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, claimed that her daughter's ghost visited her several nights in a row. According to Mary Jane, the spirit revealed that Zona's husband, Edward Shue, had murdered her by breaking her neck. Mary Jane was so convinced that she went to the authorities and begged them to reopen the investigation. During the exhumation, doctors discovered that Zona's neck had indeed been broken. Edward Shue was arrested and later convicted of murder. Remarkably, testimony about Mary Jane's visions helped persuade investigators to take another look at the case. It remains the only known American murder case in which a ghost story played a role in bringing a killer to justice. In 1975, George and Kathleen Lutz moved into a beautiful Dutch colonial house in Amityville, Long Island, with their 3 children. It shot and killed 6 members of his family in that very home. The Lutz family fled the house after only 28 days, claiming to have experienced terrifying paranormal activity, including cold spots and strange, unexplainable odors, green slime oozing from the walls, swarms of houseflies in the dead of winter, physical levitation, and demonic entities. While critics and skeptics have heavily debated the validity of their claims over the years, it remains one of the most famous haunting stories in history. The Enfield Poltergeist, taking place between 1977 and 1979. This is one of the most heavily documented poltergeist cases in the world. Inside a council house in Enfield, North London, a single mother named Peggy Hodgson claimed her children were being terrorized by an aggressive spirit. Paranormal investigators, journalists, and police officers witnessed furniture moving on its own and overturning, knocking noises coming from inside the walls, objects flying across rooms, Janet speaking in a deep, gravelly, demonic voice that belonged to a man named Bill Wilkins, who had previously died in the house. This terrifying case served as the direct inspiration for the movie The Conjuring 2. The Haunting of the Whaley House. Officially recognized by the U.S. government as a haunted house, the Whaley House in San Diego has a dark and tragic past. Built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley on land that was previously used as a public gallows, the house became a hotbed for tragedy, including the suicide of Whaley's daughter. Visitors and staff frequently report the heavy footsteps of Yankee Jim Robinson, a thief who was hanged on the property before the house was built. Apparitions of Thomas Whaley himself standing on the upper landing. The smell of cigar smoke and French perfume drifting through empty rooms.